Hello, my Bandicrew, and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be going live on Valentine's Day, and it's going to be me having a discussion with you about what I love in the Crash Bandicoot series. Usually this channel covers lore and theories, but today I just wanted to have an unscripted discussion about my love for the franchise that I hold near and dear to my heart, Crash Bandicoot. So, grab yourself a Wumpa-scented candle, get your Bandicootie on your shoulder, and come watch a video all about my love of the Crash Bandicoot series. I'm just gonna have a little chart showing all of the games in the franchise, and I'm going to say a little bit of something about what I love about each entry in the series. I'm not going to have like this big, long, blown out like documentary on it. It's just going to be me pointing out a couple things that I liked about each game. So without further ado, let's continue on. So first we have Crash Bandicoot, the original 1996 version. This game is legendary to me. It isn't the best controlled game, it isn't the best looking game, but when it comes to picking out the favorite first entry of a series, you can't go wrong with Crash Bandicoot 1. You could jump, you could spin. Crash was really, starting off and developing his character. We didn't really know where he was going to go from here. We already knew that there was a sequel coming out because on the instruction booklet on Crash Bandicoot 1, on the last page, it said Crash Bandicoot 2 coming. So we knew he was coming. But if I had to pick one thing about the original game that I liked, or I loved, I would say that I loved the characters. Ripperoo specifically. Ripperoo, Koala Kong, and Pinstripe, they were just oozing with character, and I loved it for that. Then we move on to Crash Bandicoot 2. Crash Bandicoot 2 I loved for its humor. Cortex would ask you to get a crystal, and smart-ass me would go into the level and not get the crystal. Just so I could listen to Cortex yell at me. And it's really fun that they took the time to add that into the game. It wasn't just, oh, you didn't get the crystal, oh well. You could just exit the level without getting crystals, and Cortex would be like, Crash, look, this is what a crystal looks like. Go back in there and get it. And I laughed and laughed when that happened for the first time. So the humor in this game, plus they added Coco. Coco is easily one of my favorite characters of the franchise. So we got Coco, we got the humor, and also, I can't forget, we got Polar. I love Polar, I think he's precious. So then we move on to Crash Bandicoot Warped. Crash Bandicoot Warped added time trials. I like the time trials, but I don't love the time trials. I do, however, love time travel as a genre. So when Crash started time traveling and going to different time periods, I loved it, especially when he went and encountered Baby T. Love dinosaur stuff. So Crash running away from Triceratops, oh my goodness, I was just in love with it. Now we move on to CTR. Crash Team Racing, hands down, my favorite video game of all time. I can't say anything other than I just love everything about it. If I had to pick one thing to just like go gushing over, it would be the controls. Not even just talking about how well the game controls. It was just night and day from Mario Kart. The jumping, the sliding, the boosting, everything. Mwah, chef's kiss. I say that a lot on this channel. Mwah, chef's kiss. Might be a catchphrase, might not be. But CTR had the best controls out of any kart racer that I've ever played, ever. And then on top of that, you had Zany Oxide, You had the trophy girls. They were a great addition. That's getting ahead of myself. I was going to say something about the nitro-fueled version. But yeah, so great controls. It had a story mode, which I loved for a kart racer. It's just amazing. Then we move on to Crash Bash. Crash Bash doesn't have all that much that's good about it. Being a completionist and trying to 200% this game was heck. I even tried to cheat using GameShark codes for the ballistic levels, but it would only change the number. It wouldn't change your health points. So say you had 100 balls left. If the balls went into your goal, ding, 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 the number would subtract, but the number would stay the same. So your HP would go down, and you would still lose, but it would your number would still say 100. So I tried really hard. It took quite a long time for me to get 200% back in the day, but I managed to do it. Now, as far as something that I loved about Crash Bash, I would just have to say the new mechanics that they added and the new animal buddies, like Crash riding the little pink dolphin, I thought was precious. And the dot dash levels where there was the pterodactyl or the giant toxic monster, it felt like they were expanding upon the series and giving it more lore. And my little mind ate that up 24 years ago. I loved all the lore that they were adding into the series. Now we move on to Wrath of Cortex. Wrath of Cortex, let's see. Wrath of Cortex had terrible, terrible loading times and had a lot of gimmicky levels. I hated the hamster ball levels, but this isn't a what did I hate about. So what I love from Crash the Wrath of Cortex is that they added Crunch. Crunch as a character, despite not having a set character through all of his appearances, it's nice that we have more hero characters. Crash and Coco feel like the only heroes, especially coming right off of Bash, where they gave you 2 villain characters as your allies. So, Crunch, I love you, buddy. Then we move on to the Huge Adventure / XS, Extra Small. I love this game because it was the first handheld game of Crash Bandicoot. And I remember back before I owned a PlayStation, and I was only playing the original trilogy at my friend's house before I owned these games for myself, he said to me, "Oh, don't worry, one day you'll be able to play Crash on Game Boy." And I said, Crash is a PlayStation mascot. There's no way I will ever get a Game Boy Crash Bandicoot game. But then, here we go. Crash the Huge Adventure. It was like the original trilogy in the palm of my hand. The controls were great, and I loved the secret boss Mega Mix at the end. Then we move on to 2 Entrance. I guess I'd say I love Entrance. It was more of the same, and then they added Entrance to it. So he's a new character, 5th dimension, so it's fun that we got some new lore added there. The hamster ball levels returned that I didn't like from the Wrath of Cortex, and a lot of the enemies are based off of the Wrath of Cortex. You get the hover pack from the Wrath of Cortex. So a lot of assets from the Wrath of Cortex was copied over into 2 Entrance. What I loved would just be Entrance. So, like I said, adding lore to the series, a new dimension. Because up until this point, dimensions weren't really discussed. You had just the normal dimension you're in, then time travel here, then aliens. I guess technically you can say the Hyperspace Temple could be in an alternate dimension. And that was in Bash and the Wrath of Cortex. Then you were back on Earth in the Huge Adventure, and this was the first time that we talked about other dimensional beings. Then we move on to Nitro Kart. Nitro Kart, to me, I enjoyed a lot less than CTR, mainly because the controls were not as tight, and the levels felt very copy-paste from CTR. It didn't really feel all that new. However, what I loved about this game was the cutscenes. The cutscenes, they're not the best by today's standards, but back when they first came out, I wanted a cartoon based off those cutscenes so badly. I was in love with the cutscenes. Geary vacuuming Tiny, and Tiny like purring and moving his head, and then Crash climbing up with the scepter, and it was all... I just thought it looked really cool, and I really wanted a cartoon based off those cutscenes. So I loved the cutscenes. And I also loved that we got like the copycat aliens. So you got Nash for Ripperoo, Krunk for Papu, the Norms for the Komodo Bros, and then people say that Pinstripe and Geary are parallels because the gangsters and the mafia guys like to be like super clean and slick, and Geary was all about being clean. So I thought it was neat that they had those guys there to, again, add to the lore. And then we move on to Crash Bandicoot Purple, or Crash Bandicoot Fusion. This game is pretty much shovelware with Crash slapped on it. The story is nonsensical. They don't even try to explain how these guys crossed over. It's just, oh, Cortex and Ripto are fighting, and look, your enemies are dressed up as the opposing character. Go. And it's just a minigame compilation, essentially. If I had to say something I loved about it, despite the fact that it was a bad crossover, I just loved that Spyro was brought into a Crash game officially. Technically, on the Game Boy Advance version of Nitro Kart, Spyro was a playable character. But other than demos and being a playable racer in arcade mode, this was Spyro's first appearance in the canon game. So now we move on to Crash Twinsanity. Crash Twinsanity, I'm not trying to be, overly excited about it, because I know that this is a cult game that a lot of people, they like the original trilogy and then they like Twinsanity. Twinsanity's humor is off the charts, and I really like the acapella music. I could say I love the acapella music because I would hum it to myself and da 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 da. Yeah, like it was just. I can't keep saying Chef's Kiss. That gets redundant, but I really, really loved the music, and I loved the comedy of this game. I do wish that they were given an extra 2 years to complete all the stuff they wanted, because, man, Crash Bandicoot Evolution would have been off the chain. Then we move to Crash Tag Team Racing. This is the first Radical developed game. Tag Team Racing was great. It was an adventure / kart racer. So like I said, how I liked that CTR had an adventure mode, this actually had on-foot platforming plus racing. Now the racing wasn't as good as CTR. I'd say arguably it was better than Nitro Kart's controls, but there was a lot to be desired as far as the racing portion goes, and when the game is called Crash Tag Team Racing, you really got to nail the racing aspect of the game. What I loved about this game was the inclusion of other mutants that were not created by Cortex. So you had Pasadena, Chick Stew, and Willy Wumpa Cheeks. And then we got the introduction of Ebenezer Von Clutch. And that's pretty much it. I liked the character. I loved the characters, quote unquote. And I loved that it was another platforming game. Then we move into... I actually don't have a picture of it, but in between these two would be Crash Boom Bang. The only thing I could say is I loved the Viscount. The Viscount was a cool character. He's a purple Tasmanian devil wearing a suit And I really liked his backstory. He's like this rich guy whose father or grandfather was in the Titanic, and he's seeking out the big power crystal to get a wish. So the Viscount was the best part of Crash Boom Bang, and I loved him. Then we move on to Crash of the Titans. This was the first part of a trilogy. Again, there's going to be another game in between here that I have to mention. What I loved about this game were the Titans. The Titans were a lot of fun. They were limited because it was their first outing. They couldn't jump. But I loved the Titans in this game. Then in between would be Crash Bandicoot Mutant Island, which was a BlackBerry game. What I loved about that game was they had little background details to lore, like Cortex's grandparents. You see them in portraits on the wall. And I also like that they brought the carbon crashes over from Crash of the Titans into the next installment of the franchise. The carbon crashes from the short that were released with this game actually appeared in Mutant Island. I'll bet they looked a little different. I do believe that they were meant to represent the same characters. Then we move on to Mind Over Mutant. What I loved in this game was, again, the Titans. We got the Titan heroes. They could jump around now. You could store them like Pokemon. They were just so much fun. I loved them a lot. And it's a real shame that these games get a bad reputation because I love the Titans. And it would be fun to have some of them come back in future installments. The Insane Trilogy, it's just repeating, again, all the stuff I loved about these games down here. Plus, we got a new fresh coat of paint on them. And we got the powers from Crash 3 brought into Crash 2. Unfortunately, not into Crash 1. I've got Platinums in all of 2 and 3's levels. I haven't gone back and done Crash 1 because those levels are way too long, man. And I just get really frustrated. What I love about these games is the same thing I loved about these games. Now we move on to Nitro Fueled. I said CTR was my favorite game of all time. Nitro Fueled is my absolute favorite game of all time. Not only did it have everything from the original CTR, it added the Nitro Kart tracks, and it gave a new spin on them. It made them stand out more. They were their own thing. Then we had the entire cast of Crash Bandicoot. Only like 3 or 4 characters were missing. Tons of background stuff in each level. It was just oozing with lore. It was oozing with fan service. It was just the best Crash experience that I've ever had playing a game. So, what do I love about Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled? Literally everything. I loved the Grand Prix. I loved the characters. I loved everything. Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled is my favorite Crash Bandicoot game. Then we get to Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time. What I love about Crash Bandicoot 4 is that it fills in continuity holes from Crash 3 into CTR. There's tons of lore stuff that they added into this game to make it a proper midquel to follow into CTR. Personally, people are going to say, get good. I found the game too hard. I'd never 100%ed it. And I don't think I ever will. I've seen a lot of people posting their 106% and saying, oh yeah, I did it. I just can't be bothered with it. I get so upset and frustrated that I did my playthrough, and that was good enough for me. So what I love about this game is its nods to continuity, and it's filling in quote-unquote plot holes. Then we move to Crash on the Run. Crash on the Run was a short-lived game. I can't believe it didn't last longer than it did. It still had a fan base when it was closing down, and I was so upset when they turned it off. There's not even an offline mode. Like, had they done that for us, I would have been fine. But the fact that it's unplayable now is just a spit in the Crash community's face. I think I liked this game a lot more than other people did, because I saw a bunch of people complaining about stuff on Reddit and 4chan and stuff. Both of these games, frankly, get way more hate than I think they deserved. What I loved about this game, similar to Nitro Fueled, was just the nod to continuity. All the different costumes, the skins you could unlock were just displaying that King, the group working on the game, they were trying to have fun with the history of the series and nod to continuity for fans. The different skins represented different characters. Coco had a Megumi skin, a Purah skin. Crash had a Crunch skin, a Polar skin. He had what was I gonna say? He had the Radical Design skin. It was just a lot of fun, and this game chronologically happens at the end of the timeline. Like, right now, this is the furthest we go in the timeline, unless you want to talk about, like, jumping to the future and future tense and stuff in Wrath of Cortex, or some of the future levels in Crash 4, or even the Rustland Grand Prix in Nitro Fuel. This is the main end of the timeline. Which moves us on to our last entry in the franchise. What do I love about Crash Team Rumble? What I love about Crash Team Rumble, despite it not having an offline mode and me being stuck in lobbies waiting for people to come into party mode so I could get stupid badges, swear I'm not trying to be salty. What I love about Crash Team Rumble is that it's one of a kind. It's a new genre. It's a beat 'em up, collectathon, something. I know that it's mainly just an add-on from Crash 4, that they took like a multiplayer mode from Crash 4 and decided to make it its own game. And I understand that. Most of the assets are from Crash 4. And now we've got Spyro stuff in it. So what I love about this game, it's going down to what I said about Crash on the Run. The skins and the emblems and the emotes, all the stuff that pays homage to the history of the franchise, I just go gaga for. Like, I just love the fact that we're getting stuff that represents the past in the present. And I'm very nostalgic for the series, so I love that. So, my Bandicrew, that is the video. I hope you have a wonderful Valentine's Day. If you made it this far into the end of my Crash Bandicoot Valentine's Day 2024 video, you're a legend. I appreciate you watching and viewing, and hopefully commenting and liking. I want to expand my channel further, and if you guys have any topics you want to discuss with me, just let me know in the comments section, because like I said, Crash is a staple franchise of my life, and I just want to keep pushing out Crash Bandicoot content to you guys every week. So, take care, my friends, and have a great night.